right now, your stomach is keeping time.
Literally keeping time.
Yeah, literally. Like, whether you realize it or not, your digestive system has this internal, highly calibrated, completely Pavlovian clock.
Right.
And it is dictating your mood, your focus, your cravings at this exact second.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is, because the last 40 years, the fitness industry has just treated the human digestive tract like a dumb furnace.
Just throw coal in it.
Exactly. You had the old school bodybuilding camp screaming that you must eat 6 small meals a day, packing your entire life into endless little plastic containers.
Here's Tupperware lifestyle.
The Tupperware lifestyle, right? To stoke the metabolic fire. And they tell you, like, if you don't eat every 2 hours, your metabolism just crashes.
You lose all your hard-earned progress instantly.
Right. And then pulling with equal ferocity on the exact opposite end of the rope, you have the modern biohacker movement.
Yeah, the fasting guys.
The fasting guys. And they are looking at the 6-meal-a-day people like they have completely lost their minds.
Like they're living in the Stone Age.
Exactly. I mean, they are absolutely militant about intermittent fasting, insisting that eating once, maybe twice a day, is the undeniable secret to human optimization.
Right.
So you have these two massive camps, right? And both are completely convinced they've cracked the biological code, and both are basically demanding that you ignore your own intuition to follow their dogma.
And it creates a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance for you, the listener, who is probably simply trying to figure out how to structure your day.
Without developing an eating disorder.
Right. Exactly. Because the problem with both of those dogmatic camps is that they are entirely focused on the mechanistic outcome.
The thermodynamic equation.
Yeah, the thermodynamics, while they completely ignore the reality of human behavior.
And neurobiology.
Right. They treat humans like bomb calorimeters in a vacuum.
And that is exactly why we are here today. Our mission for this deep dive is not to jump into that endless tug of war.
No, we're stepping out of it.
Totally. We aren't here to crown the fasting bros or the Tupperware bodybuilders as the ultimate winners.
Right.
Instead, we are going to completely dismantle the myths surrounding your metabolism by going down to the absolute biological foundations.
We want to decode the psychology of dieting.
Yes, because the real battleground isn't in your digestive tract, it's actually in your brain.
That's where the real work happens.
Right. And we are pulling heavily today from a massive stack of research, including some phenomenal visual models and data synthesized by the team at the Nuance Lifter.
Yeah, their visuals are incredible.
They really are. So we need to shift the focus from purely what you are putting into your body to the cognitive and neurological reality of how your brain processes the temporal delivery of that energy.
Because the physical mechanics matter, of course.
Right.
But the mental mechanics, the neuroendocrine signaling happening in your hypothalamus, that is where diets actually succeed or fail in the real world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by jumping into the deepest end of the pool and taking a sledgehammer to the great stoking myth.
Let's do it.
So this is that pervasive idea that your metabolism is essentially a campfire, right? And if you don't keep throwing food on it, the fire just dies.
Yeah, the baseline assumption for decades was that the thermic effect of food, which is just the energy it takes to digest a meal, somehow exponentially increases your overall burn rate.
If you just chop your daily calories into 6 tiny pieces.
Right. The idea was that eating multiple small meals keeps your metabolic rate artificially elevated all day long.
Right.
But if we actually look at decades of rigorous metabolic ward research, where, every single breath and calorie is measured in a controlled room, the stoking effect is a complete fabrication.
Wow. Just totally made up.
Basically, yeah. I mean, your basal metabolic rate, your BMR, which accounts for roughly 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure.
Which is huge.
Right. It's the vast majority of your calorie burn.
Mm-hmm.
That is determined by the metabolic demands of your organs.
Okay.
Your liver, your brain, your heart, your kidneys, and the amount of skeletal muscle mass you carry.
So it's about the tissue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those tissues require a massive, continuous supply of ATP just to maintain cellular homeostasis.
Huh.
The thermodynamic reality is that your internal organs do not care how many times you pick up a fork.
Man, that is going to be a tough pill to swallow for anyone who spent the early 2000s setting an alarm to eat a tilapia fillet every 3 hours.
I know, but think about the math.
Right, let's do the math. If you are eating 2,000 calories a day and the macronutrient breakdown is identical, Your total daily energy expenditure is going to be the same whether you eat that in 2 sittings or 6 sittings.
Yeah.
Because like 10% of 2,000 calories lost to the thermic effect of food is 200 calories.
Always 200 calories.
It literally doesn't matter if you calculate 10% of a massive 2,000 calorie meal or 10% of 6 330 calorie meals.
The math is exactly the same.
Yeah.
The physics of thermodynamics are absolute. But where this gets deeply interesting is how the body actually monitors its long-term energy status.
Oh, this is the visual from the Nuance lifter.
Yes. The Nuance lifter material provided this fascinating visualization to conceptualize it. Imagine a translucent human torso.
It's like glowing, right?
Yeah, glowing with this bioluminescent light,
Yeah.
revealing all the internal organs. And tethered to this anatomy is a mechanical fuel gauge.
Like on a car dashboard.
Exactly like a car.
Yeah.
Swinging between empty and full, and that gauge represents leptin.
Okay, I love that visualization. But let's get into the actual mechanism there, because leptin is a word thrown around a lot in diet circles, right?
Constantly.
But without much real explanation. So how exactly is this biological fuel gauge working?
Well, so leptin is an adipokine. That's a hormone produced and secreted almost entirely by your white adipose tissue.
Which is your fat cells.
Right, your fat cells.
Yeah.
Its primary biological role is to communicate your long-term energy availability directly to the brain,
Okay.
specifically targeting a region called the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. Got it.
When you have sufficient stored energy, your fat cells secrete leptin. It travels through the bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and binds to specific receptors up there.
And what happens when it binds?
This binding process stimulates a specific population of neurons. They're called POMC and CART neurons, which basically tell the brain, hey, we have plenty of energy, you can elevate metabolism and suppress the drive to seek food.
So it's not a short-term meal-to-meal hormone.
No, not at all.
It doesn't spike wildly just because you ate a bagel.
Right.
And it doesn't crash to zero just because you skipped breakfast. It's a long-term indicator.
Exactly. It operates on a delay. It reflects your overall adiposity and your chronic caloric intake over days and rinse, not just hours.
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if the physical burn rate is identical, right, and my leptin levels are generally stable based on my overall body fat,
Right.
then why does changing my meal frequency feel so radically different?
Like, if the thermodynamics are exactly the same, why does a 20-hour fast feel like absolute agony to one guy, while forcing down 6 small meals feels like psychological torture to someone else?
That is the pivotal question right there. What's fascinating here is you were touching on the profound disconnect between systemic energy availability and acute neurochemical sensation.
Right.
Let's look at the underlying mechanism there, because it's not leptin driving that feeling.
Think about that metabolic fire concept again, but let's elevate it.
Okay.
Imagine you have a specific, finite amount of wood you are allowed to burn for the entire day.
Which is your caloric intake.
Right, your calories.
Yeah.
You could stand there and throw a handful of tiny twigs onto the fire every 2 hours.
It sounds exhausting.
Right. Or you could take 3 massive oak logs and throw them on the fire at breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay.
The total heat output over 24 hours is identical. The physical reality of the fire hasn't changed at all, but your psychological experience of managing that fire is totally different. Tending to the twigs means your entire day revolves around the fire. You're always thinking about the next twig.
Right, you're trapped by it.
Exactly. But the logs let you walk away and actually live your life.
It's a really solid analogy for the behavioral overhead of dieting. But we need to dive into the endocrinology of why your brain reacts so violently to changing that schedule.
Right, the internal alarms.
Yes. This brings us to the second major player in the metabolic orchestra, which is ghrelin.
Ghrelin.
If leptin is the long-term fuel gauge, ghrelin is the loud, obnoxious, ringing alarm clock telling you it is time to eat right now.
Right. And the nuanced lifter material visualizes this perfectly. They showed this old school brass mechanical alarm clock literally nested right in the center of the stomach.
Yes.
And it was ominously set to 0800 hours.
Which is brilliant because ghrelin is produced primarily by the cells lining the stomach. But what makes ghrelin truly fascinating from an evolutionary perspective is that it is not purely a starvation signal.
Which is what everyone thinks it is.
Exactly. We tend to think hunger means our body is physically running out of fuel. Oh, I'm hungry, my tank is empty.
Right.
In reality, ghrelin is an anticipatory hormone. It is highly sensitive to your circadian rhythms and your habitual meal schedule.
Wait, so it actually trains itself?
It absolutely trains itself. It's Pavlovian conditioning happening entirely inside your digestive tract.
That is insane.
The process is heavily mediated by the vagus nerve, which acts as this massive superhighway between your gut and your brain.
Okay, so give me an example of how that works in real life.
Okay, so say you are a person who, for the last 5 years, has eaten a carbohydrate-heavy snack every single day at 3:00 p.m.
Like a mid-afternoon energy slump kind of thing.
Right. Your body adapts to anticipate that incoming glucose load. The response actually begins before food even touches your lips.
Wow.
By 2-3 p.m., your stomach just starts secreting ghrelin. And crucially, it's not just releasing it. There's an enzyme called GOAT. Yeah, ghrelin OSL transferase. This enzyme attaches a fatty acid to the ghrelin molecule, making it active.
So it arms it, basically.
Yes, it arms it. This active acylated ghrelin crosses into the brain and aggressively stimulates a totally different set of neurons in the hypothalamus, the NPY and AGRP neurons.
And those neurons are the absolute drivers of seeking food.
They are relentless.
They are the ones that make you irritable, like hyper-focused on the office vending machine.
Yes.
And totally incapable of reading an email without getting distracted by thoughts of a sandwich.
They essentially hijack your prefrontal cortex. The alarm clock starts ringing deafeningly loud, not because you are mathematically out of calories or because your leptin gauge is empty, but simply because the clock has struck the designated hour. Your body expects the 3:00 p.m. snack, so it preemptively primes the system.
Which explains the monumental friction people experience when they try to adopt these extreme diets overnight.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the intermittent fasting craze. You take someone who normally eats 3 square meals and 2 snacks a day.
A standard American diet, basically.
Right. And they hear some biohacker on a podcast and decide, tomorrow I am going to attempt OMAD, 1 meal a day, eating only at 6 p.m.
Their conscious mind has decided to fast, sure, but their enteric nervous system hasn't gotten the memo.
The alarm clocks haven't been reprogrammed.
Not at all.
So at 8 a.m., the breakfast alarm goes off, their stomach literally growls, and those are the physical contractions driven by ghrelin, right?
Yes, the stomach is actively moving.
And they push through it with sheer willpower. But then at noon, the lunch alarm goes off, even louder.
It gets compounding.
Right. And by 3:00 p.m., the snack alarm joins the chorus. The physiological reality is that they have, 50,000 calories of stored energy in their adipose tissue?
At least they are definitively not starving.
Right. But the ghrelin spikes are creating an acute state of psychological emergency.
And this is where we run into the concept of cognitive load.
Yes, let's talk about this.
The nuanced lifter visuals represented this with an overhead shot of a sleek white wall clock. And surrounding the clock is an intense pulsing red ring.
Right, with a digital progress bar beneath it hitting 100% complete.
Exactly. That red glow signifies maximum cognitive load.
Let's really dig into what cognitive load means in this context, because I think a lot of type A fitness people, they just dismiss it.
Oh, completely.
They think, oh, I'll just be tough, I'll just grind it out and ignore the hunger. But the research shows you can't just ignore it without paying a massive neurological tax. Right?
You absolutely pay a tax. You don't get away with it for free.
Right.
When you are fighting an intense ghrelin surge, your brain is dedicating a massive amount of its processing power, its executive function, to suppressing that evolutionary drive to seek food.
Because it thinks you're dying.
Exactly. Neuropeptide Y, which is stimulated by ghrelin, is an incredibly potent orexigenic peptide. It makes you hypervigilant. If you are dedicating 80% of your cognitive bandwidth to just not eating, you only have 20% left for the rest of your life.
I mean, I've experienced this firsthand. You get truly hangry.
We all have.
You are sitting in a meeting and someone is presenting a spreadsheet and you realize you haven't heard a single word they said for 10 minutes.
Because you're internally debating whether a handful of almonds counts as breaking your fast.
Yes, exactly. Your focus at work diminishes. You snap at your coworkers.
And your athletic performance plummets too.
Oh, big time.
Your nervous system is highly distracted. If you try to go into the gym and execute a complex, heavy movement like a barbell squat, when your brain is screaming at you to forage for berries in the woods,
right,
your motor unit recruitment is going to be suboptimal. Your force production just drops.
It's the ultimate distraction. The diet isn't failing because the thermodynamics are wrong, right? The diet is failing because the cognitive load of managing those internal alarms is completely unsustainable. You are burning through your daily allotment of willpower just trying to make it to 6:00 p.m.
But this raises an incredibly important question, though.
What's that?
If forcing an extended fast and fighting those deeply ingrained ghrelin alarms creates an unbearable cognitive load, then surely the exact opposite approach must be the physiological solution.
Right, like if fasting is psychological torture for a large segment of the population, then eating constantly must be the psychological cure, right?
You would certainly think so.
I mean, if the alarm keeps ringing, just keep feeding the machine so it never has a chance to go off.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to explore the opposite extreme. And it turns out, for a very specific type of neurobiology, eating constantly is its own unique brand of psychological torture.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about the pitfalls of the classic bodybuilding grazing diet.
Right. Eating 6 or 7 small meals throughout the day. Now, on a superficial level, this solves the ghrelin problem.
Because you're eating.
Right. You are introducing glucose and amino acids into the bloodstream frequently enough that you blunt those massive spikes in neuropeptide Y.
Okay.
You successfully avoid that acute, aggressive, hangry sensation.
But you walk right into a completely different trap.
Yes, you do.
The trap of never, ever actually feeling full.
It's maddening.
And the visuals the nuance lifter provided to illustrate this are genuinely depressing.
They really are.
First, they showed a line of 6 identical, pristine white ceramic plates sitting on a black table. And in the dead center of each plate, there is a tiny, singular flame burning. Just a pathetic little flicker.
It's a stark representation of the stoking the fire myth in practice. You aren't building a roaring metabolic fire.
No.
You are just maintaining a series of frustratingly small sparks.
Exactly. But the second visual is the one that really hits home for anyone who has suffered through a prep diet.
Loading bar?
Yes. It's a static, side-on shot of an arm reaching out. On the table are 5 small plates. The first plate has a single green pea.
1 pea.
The second plate has a tiny crumb of bread. The third has a broken corner of a cracker. The fourth has a single almond. The fifth has a microscopic wedge of cheese.
Just brutal.
And hovering right next to the arm is a digital loading bar, and it is stuck eternally at 40%.
That 40% loading bar is brilliant because that is the exact neurobiological plight of what the literature identifies as a volume eater.
Right. If you are someone who intrinsically loves the feeling of a big, heavy meal, looking at 5 plates with just a pea or a crumb feels like a practical joke.
It's an insult to the brain.
I equate it to the psychological torture of being put on hold every time someone answers the phone.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Think about it. Imagine you call customer service, someone picks up and says, "Hello, how can I?" and immediately puts you back on hold music.
Infuriating.
Right. 10 minutes later, they pick up, say, "Okay, let me just look up your," and put you back on hold. You get a tiny taste of interaction, a little hint of what you desperately want, but you never get any resolution. It's totally maddening.
That is a phenomenal analogy for the subjective experience of grazing for a volume eater. They're constantly being teased hormonally and psychologically.
Absolutely.
And to understand why this happens, we need to dive into a formal psychological framework called appetitive traits.
Let's do it, because understanding appetitive traits feels like the master key to decoding why we fail diets.
It really is. Researchers have found that humans possess vastly different, highly heritable sensitivities when it comes to interacting with food. These are your appetitive traits.
Okay, so what are the different types?
Well, on one side of the spectrum, you have sensitivity to external food cues. Some individuals are what we call high responders.
High responder.
Yes, if they see a commercial for a pizza, or they smell a bakery venting its ovens onto the street, or even if they just see a bowl of fruit on a counter, their brain lights up.
Just the sight of it.
Yes. The external cue triggers an intense, immediate dopaminergic anticipation of reward.
Oh, man. And if that person is forcing themselves to follow a grazing diet, they are voluntarily exposing themselves to external food cues 6 times a day.
6 times a day, yes.
They're constantly opening the Tupperware, smelling the chicken, seeing the broccoli, tasting a tiny morsel.
Exactly. For a high responder to external cues, interacting with a tiny amount of food doesn't satisfy them. It acts as an appetizer.
It just kicks off the craving.
Right. It's like poking a sleeping bear. The sensory input of chewing and tasting a 200-calorie snack triggers the cephalic phase, primes the digestive system, but doesn't provide enough volume to shut down the drive.
It just leaves them hyper-aroused and wanting more.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the external sensitivity side. What is the other side of the appetitive traits equation?
The other side is sensitivity to internal satiety signals.
Meaning how you feel inside.
Right. How easily and by what mechanism do you actually feel full? For a volume eater, the deep neurological signal of "I am satisfied, the meal is officially over, and we can relax" is heavily reliant on gastric stretch receptors.
Gastric stretch receptors. Let's get into the mechanics of that, because it's not just about the calories hitting the bloodstream, right?
No, not at all. It's highly mechanical.
Huh.
The actual walls of your stomach contain mechanoreceptors.
Okay.
When you eat a large volume of food, like a massive salad or a huge bowl of vegetables, the physical stretching of the stomach wall activates these receptors.
They literally feel the stretch.
Yes. They send signals up the vagus nerve to the nucleus tractus solitarius in the brainstem.
Right.
This physical stretch, combined with the release of gut peptides like cholecystokinin or CCK and GLP-1 as the food empties into the small intestine, that is what creates that profound, relaxing, systemic feeling of satiety.
So if you take a volume eater and you give them a 300-calorie snack consisting of a single almond, a crumb of cheese, and 2 ounces of dried chicken breast every 2 hours...
Their stomach never physically stretches.
Never.
The mechanoreceptors remain largely inactive. That 40% loading bar visual perfectly captures their reality.
They are walking around all day long from 6:00 a.m. to 10:00 p.m., feeling like they're only 40% full.
Never reaching 100%.
They never get the postprandial somnolence, the psychological release, that parasympathetic rest and digest relaxation that comes after a large, satisfying meal.
Right. So, while they might avoid the acute, painful ghrelin spikes of an intermittent faster, they're suffering from a chronic, low-level dissatisfaction that slowly erodes their willpower over weeks and months.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture so far, the thermodynamics of fat loss are equal regardless of whether you eat 1 meal or 6.
Yes, thermodynamics remain undefeated.
Right. It all comes down to a deep psychological and neurobiological preference. Are you better at tolerating the acute ghrelin alarms of fasting, or are you better at tolerating the 40% loading bar of grazing?
That's the real choice you're making.
It sounds like meal frequency is entirely subjective. But, as always in the fitness world, there is a caveat.
Yes, there is a very specific, highly researched caveat, and it applies primarily to the demographic of people who are actively trying to hypertrophy muscle tissue or preserve lean mass while in a severe caloric deficit.
The lifters.
The lifter.
Right. Because while total daily calories dictate the manipulation of adipose tissue on the scale, the temporal distribution of protein throughout the day matters significantly for muscle protein synthesis.
Absolutely.
You can't just look at protein over a 24-hour window if your goal is maximum muscular adaptation.
No, you can't. If we connect this to the cellular level, muscle growth isn't just about dumping a bucket of amino acids into the bloodstream once a day.
Right.
It is about how many distinct, robust signaling events you can trigger to turn on the cellular machinery that builds new proteins.
And the team at the Nuance Lifter provided for this concept is incredibly cool.
Oh, I love this one.
It looks like a readout from an advanced medical monitor, but instead of a heartbeat, it's showing the activation of muscle fibers.
Right.
It's this animated data visualization showing these vibrant green muscle fibers resting along a 24-hour timeline. And at specific intervals, massive, bright orange energy pulses shoot up from the timeline, strike the green muscle fibers, and cause them to flex and glow intensely.
That visual is illustrating the mechanism of muscle protein synthesis, or MPS, perfectly. Every time you consume a sufficient dose of dietary protein, specifically a dose containing enough of the essential amino acid leucine.
Leucine.
Yes, usually around 20 to 40 grams depending on your lean body mass. It acts as a trigger.
Let's explain that trigger, because leucine is the magic word here.
It really is.
Yeah.
Leucine is unique among amino acids because it directly activates a protein complex inside the muscle cell called mTORC1, a mammalian target of rapamycin. You can think of mTOR as the master switch for muscle growth.
Okay, the master switch?
When the concentration of intracellular leucine hits a certain threshold, mTOR gets turned on, which then activates downstream translation initiation factors. It literally tells the ribosomes in your cells to start stringing amino acids together to build new muscle tissue.
That is so cool. And that chemical cascade is represented by the bright orange pulse in the visualization.
Exactly.
And if we look at the top half of that data visualization, we see 4 distinct, evenly spaced orange spikes across the 24-hour timeline.
Right, at 06.000, 12.00, 18.0, and 24.00.
Yes.
The literature demonstrates that spreading your daily protein intake across 3 to 6 meals provides this consistent, repeated anabolic signal. You are spiking blood amino acid levels, crossing the leucine threshold, and flipping the MTOR switch on 4 separate times during the day.
So you're turning the factory on 4 times.
Exactly. This maximizes the area under the curve for muscle protein synthesis.
But the bottom half of the visualization shows a completely different strategy. It shows the muscle fibers remaining dim and dormant for almost the entire day, and then right at the very end of the 24-hour timeline, there is one gigantic single orange pulse.
That represents the strict OMAD approach. 1 meal a day. You eat all 150 grams of your daily protein target in a single massive 2-hour feeding window in the evening.
So what does this all actually mean for the listener? Because if I'm listening to this and I desperately want to build muscle, but I absolutely hated the idea of carrying around 6 Tupperware containers of cold chicken breast. Am I just out of luck?
Not at all.
Am I actively destroying my gains if I only want to eat twice a day? Do I have to choose between my mental sanity and my bicep peaks?
I'd actually push back on the idea that it's a binary choice. The literature provides a lot of nuance here. You do not need to be dogmatic, but you do have to accept a physiological reality.
Which is?
A single massive meal fundamentally cannot maximize that repeated anabolic signal.
Because of the muscle full effect, right?
Exactly. Muscle protein synthesis operates on a refractory period. Once you stimulate MPS with a meal, it peaks around 90 minutes to 2 hours later.
Okay.
And then it returns to baseline, even if amino acid levels in the blood remain highly elevated.
Oh.
Yeah, the machinery basically says, okay, we've built enough for now, we need to rest. So if you eat 150 grams of protein in one sitting, you trigger MPS once. But your body cannot utilize all of those surplus amino acids to build muscle simultaneously.
So wait, what happens to the excess protein?
A large portion of it simply undergoes amino acid oxidation. The nitrogen is stripped off and excreted as urea, and the remaining carbon skeletons are converted to glucose or used for immediate energy.
Ah, so it just gets burned.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
You cannot trigger muscle protein synthesis 4 times a day if you only eat once a day. There is a definitive cap on how much tissue accretion you can trigger in a single sitting.
So it is an optimization curve, and it requires a trade-off.
Exactly. If you are an IFBB professional bodybuilder trying to step on stage at 260 pounds, yes, you absolutely need to prioritize those 4 to 6 daily protein spikes.
Because every ounce matters.
Right. You need to maximize every microscopic fraction of an ounce of muscle tissue. For that demographic, the physical benefit of the 5% optimization outweighs the immense psychological annoyance of eating multiple times a day.
Their job is to be neurotic about their diet.
Literally their job.
But what if you are just a regular person, a busy professional, a parent, someone who just wants to look great at the beach, feel strong, and maybe add 10 pounds of muscle over the next 2 years?
Then you have to weigh the physical benefit of those 4 spikes against your psychological tolerance. Let's be intellectually honest here.
Let's do it.
If forcing yourself to eat 4 times a day makes you miserable, causes unbearable cognitive load, and eventually leads to you binge eating a box of cereal at midnight because you're stressed out.
Which happens to so many people.
All the time. Then it doesn't matter how optimal your protein distribution is, the diet is going to fail entirely.
The 5% optimization of the MTOR pathway is meaningless if the adherence is 0%.
Yes, 0 times anything is 0.
Right, so 3 well-constructed meals might be the absolute perfect middle ground. You get 3 solid MPS spikes, but you don't feel like a slave to the Tupperware.
Exactly.
Even 2 large meals is infinitely better than completely failing a miserable 6-meal plan.
Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion, synthesized from the source material,
Yeah.
and really the core thesis of this entire deep dive.
Let's hear it.
The healthiest diet, the objectively most optimal meal frequency, is simply the one you can adhere to chronically, without experiencing severe psychological distress.
It sounds so deceptively simple, like almost anticlimactic.
It does, right?
But it is actually incredibly profound when you strip away decades of marketing, supplement ads, and tribal dogma. It is not about finding the magic schedule that hacks your biology. It is about auditing your own psychology and aligning your habits with your innate neurochemistry.
And to help you do exactly that in the real world, we have synthesized the deep physiological concepts from the nuanced lifter into 3 highly actionable diagnostic tests.
Okay, let's get into these.
These are 3 simple audits you can run on yourself starting tomorrow to figure out if you are fighting your biology or working synergistically with it.
Perfect. Let's imagine the listener is currently eating, say, 4 moderately sized meals a day, and they want to test if that frequency is actually optimized for their unique brain.
Right. So test number 1 is what we call the food focus countdown test. This is a purely psychological audit of your internal monologue in the postprandial state.
The postprandial state, meaning the period immediately following a meal.
Exactly.
Okay, I love the practicality of this. How exactly do you run this test?
It requires a high degree of mindfulness. You sit down and eat your normal meal, and then you simply observe your baseline thoughts for the next 60 minutes. You must ask yourself a very pointed, honest question. Are you actively thinking about your next meal 5 to 10 minutes after you finish your current one?
Oh, man. I mean, I've been there during aggressive cutting phases.
We all have.
You meticulously scrape the absolute last grain of rice off the plate, you put the fork down, and you immediately look at your watch to calculate exactly how many hours and minutes it is until you are allowed to open the fridge again.
If you are exhibiting that behavior, your brain is sending you a glaring, unambiguous warning signal.
A red flag.
A massive red flag. That high level of immediate food focus means your current meal frequency and portion size are a severe mismatch for your appetitive traits. If you just ingested 400 calories and you were already strategizing the next feeding event, the meal you just ate was functionally too small to trigger satiety.
Because the mechanoreceptors in the stomach weren't stretched. The vagus nerve didn't send the "we are done" signal.
Precisely. You are likely a volume eater who is currently trapped in the grazing paradigm. Your brain requires physical bulk to register that a feeding event has occurred and been successfully completed. If you fail this test, you need to experiment with consolidating your daily calories into fewer, significantly larger meals so you can finally experience the psychological release of being full.
That makes total sense. Stop teasing the high responder brain.
Right.
Okay, what is test number 2?
Test number 2 is the cognitive load and gym focus test. This one is about monitoring your real-world objective performance. Specifically, if you are currently experimenting with intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, or forcing long gaps between meals.
Right, so if you are a guy trying to push your first meal all the way back to 1:00 p.m. because your favorite podcaster told you it increases autophagy.
Exactly. You need to honestly evaluate the friction you experience during that prolonged fasting window.
Like the actual mental friction.
Yes. Are you constantly clock watching at your desk? Is the sheer neurological effort required to suppress your ghrelin-induced hunger draining your concentration?
Like, are you reading the same paragraph of a brief 3 times because your MPY neurons are screaming about a turkey sandwich?
Exactly. And the physical performance component is massive here, especially for our lifting audience.
Oh, crucial.
We know that heavy cognitive load blunts physical force production. If you go to the gym during your designated fasting window, how do you perform?
Good question.
Do you feel sharp, aggressive, and highly sympathetically aroused? Or do you feel weak, uncoordinated, easily agitated, and fundamentally distracted?
If your food focus is making you drop 10% of your strength on a barbell squat, the cognitive load is objectively too high.
The ghrelin alarms are ringing too loud for your specific neurobiology.
Right.
If you fail this test, it means your fasting window is simply too tight for your current psychological state. You're spending dollars to pick up pennies.
So what should they do?
You need to break the fast sooner, or perhaps implement a small, easily digestible pre-workout meal to lower the cognitive emergency so your nervous system can actually focus on recruiting muscle fibers.
That's great advice. All right, the final diagnostic, test number 3.
This is the 40% satiety test, which we also call the volume audit. This ties directly back to that painful visual of the arm reaching for the tiny plates with single peas and almonds.
The customer service holding music analogy.
Yes, exactly that. When you eat a typical scheduled meal on your current diet protocol, Let's say it's a moderately sized, macro-balanced 400-calorie lunch.
A pretty standard meal prep lunch.
Right. How do you feel physically and emotionally 20 minutes after it's over? Do you feel a genuine sense of somatic relief? Do you feel sustained, energized, and ready to tackle the afternoon?
Or do you feel like a high responder who is just cruelly teased?
Yes.
Do you look at the empty plastic container and feel a surge of frustration because the sight, smell, and taste of the food woke up your appetite, but the lack of physical volume failed to shut it down?
If you finish a meal and you feel like you are perpetually stuck at that 40% loading bar, you are actively ignoring your innate appetitive traits.
You're fighting yourself.
If you require a deep, physical, stomach-distending, I'm satisfied feeling to actually relax your central nervous system and stop obsessing over food, then small meals are your enemy.
You are a classic volume eater.
Yes. You need to restructure your entire day around 2 or maybe 3 large meals packed heavily with fibrous, low-calorie dense vegetables and lean proteins to physically trigger that mechanical satiety signal.
I think what is so incredibly powerful about these 3 simple tests is that they completely remove the toxic moral judgment from dieting.
If we connect this to the broader societal picture, it is incredibly liberating. So many people walk around carrying immense, quiet guilt because they failed a popular diet.
Totally. They tried OMAD and broke down. They tried 6 meals a day and gained weight.
And they internalize that failure. They think they are inherently weak. They think they lack the discipline of the fitness influencers they follow.
But what this deep dive into the physiology shows us is that failing a diet often isn't a lack of willpower or moral fortitude at all.
No, not at all.
It is simply a failure to match your daily meal frequency to your innate, hardwired, appetitive traits.
You were trying to force a volume-eating, high-responder brain into a restrictive grazing diet box.
Yeah.
Or you were trying to force a highly sensitive, easily triggered ghrelin system into an intermittent fasting box.
It was a neurobiological mismatch.
It was destined to fail from the very first day
Yeah.
because the cognitive load was geometrically unsustainable.
It completely reframes how we view the concept of discipline in the fitness space.
It does. In fact, it leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought worth pondering long after this deep dive is over.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Consider how much of what society and social media confidently labels as pure, ironclad willpower in the fitness world is actually just the quiet, unacknowledged luxury of a person whose innate genetic appetitive traits happen to naturally align perfectly with the dietary dogma they randomly chose to follow.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy paradigm-shifting thought. So the guy on Instagram bragging about how easy and natural it is to eat 6 tiny meals of cod and asparagus a day doesn't necessarily have more moral willpower than you.
No, he just happens to have a brain that feels completely satisfied by a tiny volume of food.
While your brain demands a physically full stomach.
Precisely. We mistake biological alignment for moral superiority. The question you should be asking yourself isn't whether you have enough willpower to suffer through a miserable diet.
Right.
The deeply scientific question is, are you fighting your biology? Or are you finally ready to audit yourself and work with it?
That is the absolute perfect place to land today. If you found this deep dive into the behavioral and physiological nuance of dieting helpful, if it helped you see the 40-year tug of war for what it really is, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for the channel The Nuance Lifter.
Yes, please do.
We have plenty more deep dives into the complex science and the practical daily reality of the gym coming your way very soon.
There is always more to learn when you stop accepting dogma and start peeling back the mechanistic layers.
We really want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments. After listening to this breakdown and running those 3 simple tests on yourself tomorrow, are you naturally a grazer who thrives on constant small inputs to keep the cognitive load low? Or are you a one big meal kind of person who absolutely needs that gastric volume to feel satisfied?
Let us know.
Until next time, train hard, stay focused, and keep it nuanced.